Juliette Goodrich. Wall Street is clocked out, and we are clocking in to bring you the latest headlines. The closing bell just rang, and the Dow ended the day in the red. So stocks slid on the new data showing the U.S. economy shrank. So here is your headline. The gross domestic product, or GDP, declined at a 0.3% rate in the first quarter of 2025. So if we go over to our interactive stock market heat map, this is brought to you by FinViz. It shows the top 500 stocks. As you can see, a good amount of red today. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joining us now. Hi, Kelly. Let's start first things first. Why don't you break down what the GDP is and why it is so significant?
So it's significant because it essentially tells you how the U.S. economy is doing. You know, is it growing? Is it declining? You probably heard a lot today that this is the first quarter in a very long time where we've seen contraction. Now, the technical definition of GDP is the total market value of final goods and services produced within the U.S. in the year. And then just to kind of give you a sense of what those things are, I mean, goods, this is things that people make, they grow, they extract from the land. So it might be a car, an apple, you know, a gold ring, things that are made here. And then services are things that people do. So think of your hairstylist, you know, your bus driver, your doctor. Those are services. And then the market value is how much something costs in the marketplace. So what you pay for that apple or that car or for your haircut. And the way that you think about it is that that is all of the economic activity that happens in the U.S. And so when that is booming, when that is growing, when a lot of things are being produced here, sold to other countries, that is a positive thing. But this time around, that wasn't the case. And you can see on the screen right there, normally over the past few quarters, it's been 2 to 3% growth per quarter. So the fact that this came in negative, Jules, was a big deal.
So does uncertainty then drive the GDP to decline?
So what's driving GDP to decline? It's sort of uncertainty. So a number of things go into GDP in terms of how they calculate it. One is imports. And basically that skyrocketed this time around. There was a over 40% surge in imports. And what that was is businesses and consumers getting all of those foreign goods into the country before those tariffs hit, before you see price increases for those goods. So kind of, yes, you know, you said uncertainty, does that drive it? That did this time around drive people to import more. And so that's really what's driving the drag on GDP, that negative number. I will note, when you strip out imports, when you strip out exports, kind of all of that tariff noise, the underlying growth, we call it core GDP, that actually grew 3%. So yes, the headline, I think for a lot of people was scary today. We never like to see contraction, but the underlying data still shows that we're in a good place once you strip out that tariff noise. But Jules, it's very hard to strip out the tariffs because that is a looming thing that everyone is very worried about.
Good explanation. Okay, so the numbers really aren't as bad as we're talking about. Inflation data came in a little better than expected. So what is going on there?
Yeah, so this was a bright spot today, and I actually think that's exactly why you saw the market start off more in the red, but finish still in the red, but not certainly off session lows. So PCE inflation, that is the Fed's preferred gauge for inflation, that came in cooler than expected. We saw a 2.7% increase on an annual basis last month. And this came in at 2.3%. So we're getting closer to that 2% target. What this tells all of us and all these economists and the Fed is that the underlying inflation trend is good. The wild card is going to be tariffs, though. What happens when companies start flowing those price increases through to you and me? So that's what we're watching for in the future, Jules.
All right, Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, thank you. President Trump questioned once again about facilitating the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from an El Salvador prison. A reporter at today's cabinet meeting asked Trump if he thought the El Salvador president would turn him down if he made that request. So let's take a listen to his response.
I really don't know. I know that he's been a great friend of our country. He's gotten a lot less money than this would take from us if we were going to build these jails and do what he's doing. And they run a very professional operation. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. I really leave that to the lawyers, and I take my advice from Pam and everybody that is very much involved. They know the laws, and we follow the laws exactly.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also asked about Abrego Garcia's return. He said he would never discuss foreign policy with the press or a judge because foreign policy belongs to the executive branch. So CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joining us live now. Hi, Scott. So all of this is happening as a judge's order pausing the discovery of evidence in the Garcia deportation case is about to expire. So do we know when that order will be lifted?
The Department of Justice and the Trump administration have been given a few more days. There was actually a deadline at the end of the day today that has been extended through next week for some of these matters. But to be clear, what the president is saying, and this conversation or lack of conversation with the Salvadoran president, really is immaterial to this judge. She has ordered the return of Abrego Garcia from that Salvadoran prison, an order that has not been followed. She has ordered the administration to answer questions about why Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported, what his condition is, where he is, what the situation is in terms of getting him back, and she hasn't gotten answers for that. So no matter the conversations that may or may not be happening between the U.S. government and the Salvadoran government, this judge has been defied, which makes this a bigger issue than just the future prognosis and trajectory of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. It's now about whether the executive branch is going to honor what the judicial branch orders it to do.
A judge is now blocking the Department of Homeland Security from actually transferring migrants out of its custody to other agencies. So what happens to be the reasoning behind that decision?
Yeah, there's different battles popping up in different courthouses across the country where there are different groups of would-be deportees. Their deportation pending future legal arguments pending the case. In this one instance in Massachusetts, a federal judge had ordered a halt on some deportations through the Department of Homeland Security, but that was circumvented when the administration used the military to execute the deportation. Now the judge is saying, no, you can't have any branch of the government, any part of the administration execute these deportations till we're sure that there's been due process. You'll see other holds on other deportations from Colorado to Texas to Maryland, but this one has now been expanded to avoid it being circumvented. This really is the defining issue. These deportation lawsuits, which are popping up throughout the country, have so very much been the definition of the legal battles of the first 100 days of this Trump administration.
All right, Scott McFarland. Scott, thank you. Let's go to a live look at the White House now, where CEOs and industry leaders who have committed to investing in the U.S. are joining President Trump for his so-called Investing in America event, and it's kicking off any moment now. So some notable attendees, top executives from companies like NVIDIA, GE Aerospace, Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, and SoftBank. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro joining us live now. Hi, Aaron. You know, Trump touted trillions of dollars in U.S.-based investments at his cabinet meeting this morning. So what can we expect from today's event?
Well, we heard the president say during that cabinet meeting that they have secured at least $8 trillion in investments from countries. And we're expected that that will be the focus of the event, not only to tout what's been done, but also to potentially encourage, recruit other companies to invest more into the U.S. All of this being a sort of impact of his, quote, reciprocal tariff plan, especially when it comes to China, to try and force companies to bring back manufacturing inside the U.S. Leading up to what we're expected to hear any minute now, the beginning of this event, the White House put out this website listing at least 47 of these investments and the different companies, many focused on technology such as artificial intelligence, data centers, such as $500 billion from OpenAI and Oracle for what is called Project Stargate, as well as $500 billion apiece from NVIDIA and Apple. The White House is also welcoming and touting news today of an IBM investment of about $150 billion to increase production of quantum computing. One, it's notable that these will be spread out across several couple years, and it's notable that the president, the White House are focusing on this as we're hearing news about the economy, GDP, as they are again pointing to the bet that President Trump is making in his tariff plan, bringing manufacturing back to the U.S.
And Aaron, while we have you, we understand that the U.S. and Ukraine are on the cusp of sealing a rare minerals deal. So what is the Trump administration saying about that particular deal?
Yeah, just last hour we heard from President Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, who said on Fox News he actually expected the deal to be announced around 2:30 p.m. this afternoon, said they are still working on the minute details of this deal, but he sounded optimistic that it would happen. And in that cabinet meeting earlier, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that Ukraine had been looking to reopen some of the last-minute agreements in this deal. Secretary Bessent said he hopes Ukraine reconsiders kind of tinkering at the edges on this deal, but it certainly seems it's just in the details phase. It is 3 separate documents that U.S. officials have said are just working out the technical details. And just a reminder of what this deal is, it essentially opens up U.S. investment and, at least 50% control from what we've seen in reports of the rare earth minerals in Ukraine. These are minerals that can be used for everything from electronics to weapons, and is something that Ukraine has been open to in exchange for potential financial military aid from the U.S. We know one sticking point that Ukraine wants is security guarantees from the U.S. as they are in, their war with Russia. President Trump has been hesitant on that. Potentially, let's see in the details of this deal if that will be guaranteed at all. But it's something that Ukrainian officials earlier today have said could be signed in the next 24 hours. And Ukrainian officials have also said that their finance ministry is headed to Washington today, potentially to talk about or be there at the public signing of this deal.
Aaron, thank you. A Lacrosse hazing incident has now turned into a criminal investigation, the stunt involving high school students. Next. Stay with us. You are watching CBS News 24/7. The NFL is imposing hefty fines over the prank phone call to Shedeur Sanders during the NFL draft. The Falcons face a $250,000 fine, and defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich faces a $100,000 fine. The Falcons say Ulbrich's 21-year-old son found Sanders' phone number on an iPad left open at his parents' house. Then he sat beside a friend who carried out the prank call. Sanders said the call didn't really have an impact on him. He said it was a childish act, but that everybody does childish things here and there. On Saturday, the Cleveland Browns selected Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. Our maps now taking us to San Antonio, Texas, where a man climbed a tree and stayed up there for hours to try and avoid immigration authorities. Video from the scene shows the man identified as Raul Akal hiding in the tree. ICE agents say he's in the country illegally. He eventually came down and was taken into custody. Attorneys for one of the 2 people killed during the mass shooting at Florida State University earlier this month are speaking out. 45-year-old Tiru Chaba died along with 57-year-old Robert Morales when a gunman opened fire around the university's student union just before noon on April 17th. Chaba leaves behind a wife and 2 children. Attorneys for his family are calling for full transparency and a thorough investigation into the tragedy.
My sincerest hope is that we're able to work together to make these families whole and provide whatever remedies possible without necessarily being antagonistic, without being adversarial.
Every day that they don't have basic answers to what happened is difficult for them. It's hard to process the grief appropriately without a real understanding of everything that happened on that particular day.
The alleged gunman, the stepson of a local sheriff's deputy, was a junior at the university. He remains hospitalized after being shot in the jaw by police that day and has yet to be formally charged. Jumping the map to Louisiana, cleanup is underway after an oil and natural gas spill. Images from the U.S. Coast Guard show the size of the spill. This is on the Garden Island Bay Marsh. Authorities say the leak is coming from a well. There is no word on the cause. Turning to severe weather, strong storms in the Pittsburgh area have killed at least 4 people. Power was knocked out for hundreds of thousands of homes as powerful wind gusts brought down trees and prompted tornado warnings.
We both ran in and we ran to the basement, like right away. Yeah. I didn't want to take any chances.
I just can't believe this. I mean, I was driving around and there's trees down everywhere. And as soon as I pulled up, I couldn't believe what I could see right now.
In southern Missouri, a tornado struck just outside Springfield with winds up to 85 miles an hour that uprooted trees, destroyed roofs, and crushed buildings. Powerful storms hit Texas last night. In Wichita Falls, some streets were flooded after heavy rains just swept through that area. A tornado was also reported moving through Knox and Baylor counties. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen joins us live from Ellis County, Texas right now. Hi, Jason. I see you're driving around looking at the damage. Give us a lay of the land.
Yeah, sure, Joe. So that area you were just talking about, the storms that we're following now have largely moved past that spot. So that's far up northwest Fort Worth. Now, they're not completely out of the woods. They've had a lot of rain, 1 to 2 inches per hour. So they're still watching the rivers there as everything drains away. There's predictions the river there in Wichita Falls could rise to major flood stage. So they'll be watching that throughout the afternoon and into the evening. The new focus right now, and let's show you here out the front, we're driving south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and this is an area right now that is still in a tornado watch. We have gotten out of the heavy rain that we have seen in the Dallas-Fort Worth area over the last, I'd say, hour and a half to 2 hours. There's been some lightning, and if you watch as we're in this shot, don't be surprised if you see some lightning flashes here, heavy rain, and there's the potential, especially as we get into the afternoon hours, for some large hail and even some isolated large tornadoes. If we can go back to that dash shot just for a second, and you look at the sky and you see how those overcast skies are kind of broken up, because we're getting into an area right now where the overcast, the cloud cover, it isn't quite as thick as it's been in Dallas-Fort Worth. The temperatures down here are warmer, and that could enable some of these storms to kind of redevelop and get strong. So this is an area, again, south of Dallas-Fort Worth and then extending east across Texas out toward Arkansas. They'll be watching throughout the afternoon into the evening hours for those big storms that could produce some big hail, maybe some big tornadoes. We'll be watching it here, Jules, throughout the afternoon and evening.
All right, Jason Allen, thank you. And thanks to your driver, too, and staying in the slow lane. Appreciate it. All right, so we saw them cruising around, a lot of damage. And then he was talking about the tornado warnings that could happen at any time.
Yes.
The warnings now where a potential tornado could happen.
That northeast corner of Texas where he is, let me show you why that's the bullseye. Okay. Look at the view from the satellite right now looking down on us. So we'll get that high view. You see this big congregation right here. There's definitely something happened in this part of the country. That's what the visible satellite looks like. But if we look at this from a cloud top perspective, we can pull out where the higher clouds are and the greater source of energy in the atmosphere right now. And this is pretty much parked right over northeast Texas. If we visualize where the severe ingredients are, the deeper the shade of red on here, the greater the ingredients, which we were just hearing about from the reports on the ground there. Warmer temperatures, higher humidities. That's coming up from the Gulf, and it's meeting back here with relatively dry air. Watch what happens here over the next 24 hours. We're going to take that image, and we're going to forecast it, and you see this very well-defined line where those two are meeting in the same place, northeast Texas. You can really see how the dry air is starting to scour things out as you head out over towards the southeast. But we still have a very well-defined line right here going into tomorrow, and when we put on top of that where the real trouble spots are today, watches and warnings, same spot. All of the yellow on here, that's where you've got tornado watches. So that means they're on guard for the potential for more tornadoes to develop. The red boxes are actually flood warnings. Take a look at the radar up here behind me, because over the course of the last 3 hours, northeast Texas is really the part of the country that is lit up. That's what it looks like just going back over the last 3 hours. But when we come back to the map for just our last look at what's about to happen here, we're going to take that forecast forward and watch that line of showers. Some of it does move off into the upper Midwest over the next 24 hours, but we're just going to see more storms like that redevelop over this same spot, Juliet, tomorrow. Shouldn't be as bad tomorrow, but tomorrow early morning, another line of storms like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., their time tomorrow. Probably they need to watch that window again.
All right, Darren, thank you.
Sure.
So let's go to Southern California now. It has been months since massive wildfires tore through the Los Angeles area, and now investigators set parts of the Palisades burn zone back on fire. Why? Well, they say it can help them learn more about how this fire started. CBS News Los Angeles is following this story. Here is some of their coverage from earlier today.
Investigators did these tests in the overnight hours so fire victims wouldn't be re-traumatized seeing flames in the hillsides again. We are waiting to hear from them on whether the tests were successful in terms of pinning down how the Palisades fire started. Investigators with the Bureau of alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, lit this controlled fire in a steel propane burner overnight, just a little bit bigger than a backyard barbecue. LAFD was on hand wetting the area around there and making sure that the flames did not spread. Now, these tests took place on Temescal Ridge Trail near Skull Rock. That's where investigators believe the Palisades fire began on the morning of January 7th. They were doing the test to see if they could figure out what started that fire. Investigators tell us they were hoping to evaluate some theories, maybe eliminate some possible causes.
Flame location, flame size is helpful to kind of, if you will, like replaying a movie in reverse, where you're trying to bring it back to its smallest spot, that you can do that within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
When we talked to investigators yesterday, they said there was the possibility there would be more controlled fire tests tonight into tomorrow. We are waiting to hear about whether they are going to go forward with that tonight or whether they think they have enough information with the tests that they've already run. In Pacific Palisades, Tina Patel, KCAL News.
A key witness takes the stand in the high-profile trial of Karen Reed. Details on her testimony on the night a Boston police officer was found dead. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Our map takes us to New York, where a group of high school lacrosse players accused of staging an extreme hazing ritual face an ultimatum. The DA tells the students they have 48 hours to turn themselves in or face felony kidnapping charges. So let's go to our breaking news correspondent, Chanel Call, in the CBS newsroom in New York. So hi, Chanel. The DA is saying this went way beyond hazing. What do we know so far?
Yeah, Jules, these are pretty disturbing allegations in what appears to be an act of hazing in upstate New York. The DA in Syracuse, New York, said today that some older lacrosse players basically arranged an evening out with 5 younger players, and that's when things went awry. The night was supposed to include watching a lacrosse game and picking up some food from McDonald's, but officials say an older player who was driving pretended to get lost in a remote area. That's when police say a group of accomplices basically emerged wearing masks and in black clothing, and they imitated an abduction. Now, all of the players escaped except one, and that person's hands were apparently tied while a pillowcase was placed over their head. They were then thrown into the trunk of a car. Now, 11 students from the West Hill High School, their boys lacrosse team, could face some kidnapping charges if they don't surrender by end of day tomorrow. Here's how the DA characterized the incident today.
This is not hazing, okay? This is not lighting, a bag on fire on Halloween and sticking it in your driveway. This is criminal activity, and this is hazing on steroids, okay? This could have resulted in such a tragedy. I can imagine a deputy coming upon a scene, seeing a kid with a hood over his head being abducted at gunpoint by a series of individuals, all dressed in black and masked. If that individual opened fire, would that be outside the realm of possibility?
Yeah, and just a terrifying account of what prosecutors say happened. They also say the accomplices brandished what appeared to be at least one gun and one knife. At this point, Jules, no charges have been filed, but the DA said those who do turn themselves in on that deadline by tomorrow, end of day, will likely be able to avoid any criminal charges, criminal records, and face prosecution in family court instead. Also want to mention that a representative for the school district told CBS News they are also cooperating with police in the investigation.
All right, Chanel Call. Chanel, thank you. Mohsen Madawi, a Palestinian Columbia student, was released from custody today following a judge's order. Federal agents who detained him cited a rarely used law allowing deportations if the Secretary of State decides a person poses adverse foreign policy consequences. Madawi's attorneys argued that deporting him for participating in pro-Palestine protests violated his First Amendment rights. He spoke briefly upon his release, so let's take a listen.
Me standing here with you, among you, sends a clear message It sends a message that is loud and clear, not only to the Vermonters, but to the rest of America. And the message is, we the people will hold the Constitution accountable for the principles and values that we believe in.
CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano was in court and has the details from Vermont.
We just saw Mohsen Madawi walking out of a federal courthouse here in Burlington, Vermont. Last time we saw him was here as well, walking into an appointment for his citizenship, which in turn became his detention by federal agents who were masked and whisked him away, detained him. One thing that he explained today is that when those agents took him, they tried to move him out of the state of Vermont, likely to take him to Louisiana, where Mahmoud Khalil and Rameza Osser, two students who are also being targeted under the same provision, and that the government is trying to deport, removing either their student visa or their green card, because the Secretary of State under this provision finds their presence in the United States to be a threat or to undermine U.S. foreign policy, in particular the policy of fighting anti-Semitism globally. The judge in this case today evaluated the claims from the government that he needed to remain detained and said not only that he should be released, but he denied the request from the government to keep him on a stay for 7 days before the release would happen. The judge also highlighted the overwhelming amount of support that people showed for him in letters and otherwise as a pacifist, including many members of the Jewish community at Columbia University and elsewhere, saying that he was always promoting debate, and also highlighted the chilling of speech that he sees that, as the attorneys for Madawi claim, is happening in this as the reason for why he is being detained. What his attorneys claim is that Madawi was being targeted in retaliation for his views opposing the war in Gaza. This is something that the judge brought up during the hearing and said it's not the first time that we see the chilling of speech, and that this is something that happened during the Red Scare, during McCarthyism, and he said those were not proud moments for America. The conditions for his release is he has to remain a resident of Vermont, and he can and plans to attend Columbia University, where he's supposed to graduate next month, and where he's supposed to enroll as a graduate student next semester. Other than that, we're expecting a habeas hearing. We're expecting the immigration proceedings, which are still underway. But the judge said he doesn't consider him a threat to the community, doesn't consider him a flight risk, that while that plays out, he should be pursuing his regular life and his studies in New York City at Columbia University as a resident of the state of Vermont.
The Supreme Court heard arguments today in dispute over efforts to create an online Catholic charter school in Oklahoma. The case could open the door to tax dollars going directly to religious schools. CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford has the details.
This would be the first taxpayer-funded Catholic charter school in the country, and it came about back in 2023 when Oklahoma Charter School Board agreed to approve it, and then the lawsuits came, almost immediately before the school could even get off the ground. Civil liberties groups, even the state's own attorney general, argued that direct funding with taxpayer dollars of this kind of religious charter school would violate the Constitution's rule against the separation of church and state and establishment of religion. Now, in the past, the Supreme Court has said that public money, could go to religious schools with things like vouchers or tuition tax credits that the parents would get, but the parents were then making that choice to give that to the school. This, the opponents say, is different because it's directly giving the money to these religious charter schools, as here it would do at this Catholic school in Oklahoma. But supporters of the school absolutely disagree, and they say this is very similar to past Supreme Court cases where the justices have ruled that if you're going to have these kind of generally available programs, if you're going to allow private groups or organizations to establish charter schools for, the study of Native American culture or the arts, that you can't exclude religion. religion. They say that discriminates against religion, and that would violate the Constitution. Now, in more than 2 hours of oral arguments, there was a clear ideological divide. The liberal justices were opposed to this clearly, suggesting that it would violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. But the conservatives suggested that this was similar to the tuition tax credits, to the school vouchers, that if you're going to make these kind of programs available to all comers, that you can't exclude religion or treat religious groups like second-class citizens, as Justice Brett Kavanaugh said. I always say that it's dangerous to predict the outcome of a case based on the questions at oral arguments. Justices can change their minds, for example, but it did seem after this one that the Catholic charter school was going to carry the day, that the conservatives were supportive of that. However, they were one justice short. Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself from this case. So if just one of those conservatives peels away, it would be a 4-4 tie, and that would mean the lower court ruling, which was against the Catholic charter school, would stand. Back to you.
The Texas Senate unanimously approved changes to the state's strict abortion law. These changes would clarify that doctors are allowed to perform abortions if a patient develops a life-threatening condition. This comes after women were denied treatment despite life-threatening complications with their pregnancies. If approved by the state house and signed into law, these would be the first changes to Texas's near total abortion ban since Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. In a Massachusetts courtroom, a key witness took the stand for a second day in a row in the retrial of Karen Reed. She's the woman accused of killing her boyfriend, a Boston police officer. CBS News Boston's Christina Rex reports why this witness is a central figure for both the prosecution and the defense.
Jen McCabe has been on the stand all day in Karen Reed's retrial, both on direct examination and cross-examination. Jen McCabe is considered a key witness in this case for the prosecution because she was there for so many events around that night. For the defense, because they've accused her of being the mastermind behind the cover-up to allegedly frame Karen Reed. Now, Jen McCabe has been up on the stand for cross-examination for some time now. Defense attorney Alan Jackson doing that cross-examination. And why this matters is because during the last trial, Jen McCabe was on the stand for several days for direct and cross-examination and became quite tense and at times even combative with defense attorney Alan Jackson. That has not happened in this retrial. So far, cross-examination has lasted for about 2 hours or so, and Jen McCabe has been very calm, as has Alan Jackson. Nothing has gotten tense the way it did during the last case. But Alan Jackson is focusing his questioning so far on whether Jen McCabe coordinated storylines between all of the witnesses in this case. The defense alleges that in the days following the death of John O'Keefe, that Jen McCabe was calling, texting, and meeting with various witnesses in this case to make sure that their stories lined up. Jen McCabe didn't deny doing that, but she did deny that there was any sinister motivation or intent behind those meetings, just saying instead that all these people had been through something traumatic together, which is why they wanted to make sure their stories were straight. Jen McCabe is expected to be on the stand for much longer because there's a lot of her testimony that has not yet been brought up on cross-examination. Back to you.
Some of our nation's busiest ports say they're seeing a slowdown, and it could mean empty store shelves. How businesses are bracing for Trump's tariffs next. You are watching CBS News 24/7. We've been watching the impact of tariffs on our ports. The Port of Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area is one of the busiest in the United States. But one company that works closely with the port says they've noticed a slowdown, and it's forced them to start sending their employees home early because there just isn't enough work to go around. CBS News Bay Area's Amanda Harry has the story.
The Port of Oakland is usually filled with colorful shipping containers that line the coast. But lately, Bill Belichick has noticed it looking a bit different.
You can see gaps in the container parking space.
He believes this has to do with the sweeping tariffs coming out of Washington. Abudi is the president of Oakland Maritime Support Services, a 15-acre truck parking and service facility for thousands of truckers coming to and from the Port of Oakland daily. But since new tariffs went into effect earlier this month, Abudi says things have been slower at their service facility.
It's giving our customers an atmosphere of uncertainty, and so they're not ordering as much.
And his facility is more empty.
We normally would come out to here with double loading because we're out of space. But now you can see I don't, and I have plenty of space there, and I also have a special project going on in the other half of my yard, and that's how slow it is.
He has a row of trucks that would usually be hauling containers. Now they're just sitting there. He's had to send many of his workers home early.
If I can't pay you, I can't keep you on the clock. So we are sending people home, and we hope that there's a return in business after this is settled.
The port saw a 9% increase in imports in March, which Aboudi believes was an attempt to beat the tariffs. In a statement, the Port of Oakland admits they have seen a slowdown. Quote, over the past few weeks, we have seen a modest number of vessel service reductions, situations where shipping lines cancel scheduled voyages or skip ports on their shipping routes, known as blank sailing, which are common during periods of market uncertainty. The statement goes on to say the move is a sign of cautious planning by ocean carriers in response to shifting trade dynamics. But Aboudi thinks things need to shift a different way.
We're being bullied to the rest of the world, and we need to learn to play nice.
He says he feels for everyone, because for now, everyone is going to be impacted.
This is a chain, a logistical chain. So the longshoremen are going to feel it because there's going to be less cargo coming off those ships, so they work less hours. We're going to feel it because we pull the containers. We take them to warehouses. They're going to feel it because they don't need those warehouse people. And then the ultimate is going to be the consumer. We're going to feel it in our wallet. That dollar's not going to go far.
That was Amanda Harry reporting from Oakland, California. The Port of Los Angeles is also preparing for a dramatic slowdown. Executive Director Gene Soroka, that is, spoke to our own CBS News correspondent Carter Evans. Take a listen.
What do you anticipate happening over the next couple of weeks?
In 2 weeks' time, Carter, we'll see a drop on our import side of the business by about a third. And it could be as much as 40% the week to follow. Most American importers are saying that they're stopping shipments out of China because they simply weren't going to pay 2.5 times the cost of the goods. With information coming out of Washington seemingly by the hour, it's tough to get a line of sight on what's next. Inventory on hand right now in the United States will last for about 6 to 8 weeks. After that, shelves will be bare.
With a 145% tariff, a container of Chinese goods worth $100,000 will now cost importers an extra $145,000. Business owner Miriam Al-Hamami has been stockpiling toys and games that arrived before the tariffs. 80% of her merchandise comes from China, and board games are among her biggest sellers.
So I'm buying what I think I'll sell between now and September.
You sound like a hoarder.
I feel like a hoarder. If you've seen my stores, you would see the hoarding in the back rooms.
A new partnership between Waymo and Toyota looks to bring self-driving technology to personal cars. So that means everyday people could be taking self-driving cars to work or to run errands without hailing a robo-taxi. According to Waymo, the partnership could also result in bringing Toyota vehicles into its robo-taxi fleet. A man stranded in Mount Fuji rescued not once but twice in 1 week. Why? Because of a lost cell phone. We'll explain. Stay with us. You are watching CBS News 24/7. Former Patriots coach Bill Belichick released a statement today following an interview about his new book, The Art of Winning, on CBS Sunday Morning. In the interview, Belichick's 24-year-old girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, told host Tony Dokoupil they wouldn't answer his question about how their relationship started. Let's take a listen.
Everybody in the world seems to be following this relationship. They've got an opinion about your private life. It's got nothing to do with them, but they're invested in it. How do you deal with that?
Never been too worried about what everybody else thinks. Just try to do what I feel like is best for me and what's right.
How did you guys meet?
Not talking about this.
No?
No.
University of North Carolina, where Belichick, who is 73, currently coaches, released a statement from Belichick, which says in part, Jordan, with whom I share both a personal and professional relationship, stepped in to reiterate that point to help refocus the discussion. She was not deflecting any specific question or topic, but simply doing her job to ensure the interview stayed on track. Some of the clips make it appear as though we were avoiding the question of how we met, but we have been open about the fact that Jordan and I met on a flight to Palm Beach in 2021. A CBS spokesperson told us when we agreed to speak with Mr. Belichick, it was for a wide-ranging interview. There were no preconditions or limitations to this conversation. That was confirmed repeatedly with his publisher before the interview took place and after it was completed. News we're following around the world. Concerns are growing about a possible military clash between India and Pakistan. This comes after 26 people were killed in a terrorist attack in the Kashmir territory that Indian officials are blaming on Pakistani-backed militants. Pakistan's government claimed it had credible intelligence India was planning on attacking in retaliation. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has asked the two countries not to escalate the situation. In Jerusalem, wildfires fueled by extreme heat and high winds are forcing communities to evacuate and a main highway to close. Israel's 77th Independence Day begins today, but officials have called off events in some areas due to fire danger. Cardinals are gathering at the Vatican for the conclave to select the next pope. They say the length of the process is unpredictable and the vote will remain secret and confidential. Some 135 cardinals are eligible to vote for the next pope. The conclave begins May 7th. All right, let's bring up our TikTok tube. Our CBS News social team has so much great content, including a story out of Japan where crews had to rescue a climber from the slopes of Mount Fuji not once, but twice. Take a look.
The climber had to be airlifted from Mount Fuji last week. And then a few days later, he had to be rescued again after he went back up to get the cell phone he left up there. So here's what happened. The climber is a 27-year-old Chinese student living in Japan. He climbed Mount Fuji on April 22nd and got altitude sickness, but he was able to make an emergency call and was airlifted out of there. 4 days later, he decided to climb back up Mount Fuji to get his cell phone and other things he left up there, and he got sick again. Another climber found him and he was unable to move, and he got rescued for the second time. It's suspected that he again had altitude poisoning and he was taken to the hospital. And unfortunately, it's unclear if he was even able to get the phone he left up there the first time. So what was likely happening to this man is he was getting tired, nauseous, and maybe even vomiting, which are common symptoms of altitude sickness. Altitude sickness can happen if you travel to heights with less oxygen, usually 8,000 feet or higher. To avoid it, you should try to gradually increase your altitude so you can get used to it. And if you rest and the symptoms don't go away, you should try to get to a lower elevation because they could get more serious and even deadly. Mount Fuji is about 12,000 feet high, and this climber was around 10,000 feet. Hiking season there is between July and September, but there's no penalty for hiking in the off-season. There's also no penalty or charge for being rescued, but some people think this man should be charged for having to get rescued a second time. Officials say while you can hike in the off-season, none of the medical stations up there are open, and unpredictable weather can make it hard to rescue you.
Our social team has so much great content like this on our TikTok and Instagram pages, so follow us at the handle CBS News. America Decides with Major Garrett is next. The Latino vote helped President Trump retake the White House, but now their support is dwindling. We leave you now with a live look at San Francisco, where tonight Kamala Harris is set to make her first major speech since losing to Trump in the presidential election. You're watching CBS News 24/7. America Decides is next.